Good morning. I'd like to call to order the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and welcome you to our hearing today. The title and subject of this hearing is the Federal Railroad Administration's High-Speed and Intercity Rail Program, Mistakes and Lessons Learned. And we have some distinguished panelists. We have two panels today, and I think in between we're going to squeeze in a small members panel. We've had a couple of requests for members to speak who are not on the committee, but their districts are affected by some of these projects. So we're going to provide some opportunity for a couple of the members after we finish with Secretary LaHood, and then we'll turn to our second panel. But we are delighted and pleased this morning to welcome the Secretary of Transportation, Ray LaHood, and my former colleague, who will lead off today for the administration. The order of business will be opening statements first by members, and then we'll go to Mr. LaHood, and as I said, we'll have one or two members not on the committee have requested to come forward with some brief comments, and then we'll go to our second panel today. So with that, the order of business will be, again, member statements. And I want to open with my statement, and again, thank the Secretary for his participation and others. As some of you may know, I've been a long, strong, committed advocate to high-speed passenger rail service in the United States. I was delighted to work in the past to put provisions in PREA, which was signed into law by President Bush. That was the first rail operations and Amtrak reauthorization in, I believe, 11 years. And took great pride in working on trying to set up a blueprint and some guidelines for beginning the process of instituting high-speed rail in the United States. I was also pleased when President Obama made high-speed rail one of his top priorities, and in fact I think it was his commitment and direction in which we had some $8 billion firmly anchored to high-speed rail. All that being said, I am here today and actually tried to give some of these projects as much time and leeway as possible to move forward and see what would develop. But I'm here today in this hearing to say that I'm very disappointed in some of the things that have happened. I have to give some credit where credit is due, but as far as high-speed rail, we have hit an impasse, and I'm very concerned about the progress of actually achieving a successful high-speed rail program. And the failure to date, particularly on high-speed rail, actually sets us, I think, further behind, because there are many critics to various forms of public transportation, and unfortunately it gives them more ammunition to undermine what should be positive alternative means of transportation, which is efficient, which helps with our energy problems, which has a whole host of benefits. Unfortunately, some of the high-speed rail funds, and we have not only the $8 billion that was in the Recovery Act and committed some 2.5, almost 3 years ago now in January, we had an additional $2.5 billion in a regular appropriations, bringing the total for high-speed rail in the country and rail to improvements to 10.5 billion. Of that, some 400 million has been rescinded and gone back to deficit reduction. Unfortunately, 3 states have returned money for projects that did not get off the ground, fell off the track, so to speak. Ohio, Wisconsin, and my state of Florida. And those funds, which is actually, it's quite startling that that's a third more than a third of the funds had been returned, was another setback for the program. More recently, our one hope of actually achieving high-speed rail, and I've given that project as much leeway as I possibly can in trying to see what would develop. But first, again, the one potential where we had to achieve high speed, and I mean an average of at least 110 miles per hour average. That's not reaching 110 miles an hour. That's not reaching 150 miles an hour at some point in the journey. I'm talking about the average speed, but which is the measure by which internationally high-speed rail is evaluated. But our one hope, California, appears to be in disarray. We'll hear, in fact, we're devoting an entire hearing to that next week to see where that one project is. We have problems with, first of all, the route that was chosen. And I went out with Mr. Denham and actually looked at some of it, Fresno to Bakersfield, mostly populated by agricultural community and interest. We'll hear from those folks next week. But again, the site that was chosen abandoned Southern California or the Bay Area, where you have significant populations to be served at the present time when you have incredible congestion in both of those corridors. Again, it's an initial operating segment that was chosen. The more disturbing news is within the last month, now the projections on the cost may double the original $40-some billion and reach over $90 billion. Furthermore, it appears that there be a 13-year delay. We're now looking at, what, 2033, which would mean either subsidization of a dog operation and give us a more heartburn as far as anyone seeing a viable high-speed rail operation in the United States. Then finally, I was informed last week that even if they built this segment, again, the trains the short operating segment to not serve any fixed large population, that the equipment that would be available at that point would only be contemporary slow train vehicles, which could not achieve high speed. So very concerned about the progress of California. We'll hear more about that next week. So we have $3.8 billion, the biggest amount going of the $8 billion to and a total of 10 going to California. There's 10.1, as I said, left over after the return of $400 million. Then the next issue that I have with the whole process of selecting these corridors is, well, of course, it's not something I raised, but also GAO last March said that, or in March, they said that of 210 it was, that the process that FRA had followed in selecting these lacked transparency, and some of the manner in which these were chosen did not really make a whole lot of sense. We have 3 what I call pseudo high-speed rail projects, and maybe you'll hear of those as touted as success. You have Chicago, most of them centered in Chicago, 2 of the 3, Chicago to St. Louis. That's going to run an average of 71 miles an hour. Now, that is not incremental high speed. That is not high speed, and it doesn't hold much hope for the future. Chicago to Detroit is that route goes at 64 miles an hour on average, a snail speed train, followed by a Portland to Vancouver so-called and named high-speed rail project, which is 65 miles an hour. These are, again, a bait and switch for high-speed rail, and will continue to give high-speed rail a bad name in the United States because they will not operate at high speeds and merely a mirage of high-speed rail. Finally, Amtrak and some of the projects, and there are a host of them spread around the country, will get another $3.6 billion. Of that, there is $900 million that was redirected to the Northeast Corridor. But if you take that $3.6 billion and amortize it over 3 years, you have a current subsidy of $49 a passenger on Amtrak, and you attribute the cost of that $3.6 billion and amortize it over 3 years. You're looking at a subsidization during these 3 years of $99, just $1 under 100 per ticket for every Amtrak passenger, based on 30 million, which is their current ridership. So that's disturbing. So I have to say, sort of in conclusion, we need a success. I believe that the most logical place to put high-speed rail, have said it before, I'm from Florida, you are from, members of the panel are from around the country, but we can all benefit by a success of high-speed rail in the Northeast Corridor. Unfortunately, there too we've seen delays. It's taken now 3 years to finally issue an RFP to do an environmental study. That environmental study, RFP, went out in August. To date, and this is December, there's no award for doing the environmental study in the Northeast Corridor. So we still lag behind in moving forward with that project in the Northeast Corridor. We'll all benefit by the Northeast Corridor, one, because it's the most densely populated area, 20% of the U.S. population in that corridor. We own the corridor. It is the only corridor that we own between the federal government and the states. They own almost the entire distance between Washington, D.C. and Boston. We, of course, operate Amtrak's other service over freight rails, 22,000 miles of them. We also will benefit as a nation because 70% of our chronically delayed flights. Now watch this week when the storm hits later this week. You'll see repeated, whether it's summer or winter, the meltdown of air transportation, and most of it will emanate from the Northeast Corridor, so we can all benefit by, again, having one success in our most densely populated area on a corridor that we already own. Half of Amtrak's passengers of the 30 million are in that corridor, so again, it just makes sense. Now finally, let me say I had offered an alternative and suggested separating out the Northeast Corridor into a separate entity. I did meet a slight bit of resistance on that, and I announced recently that I was willing to look at having Amtrak, and if there wasn't an Amtrak, we would have an Amtrak. I've supported a nationwide service system, but I am willing to work with Secretary LaHood, Mr. Boardman, and others to come up with a plan, and we don't have to create a separate entity and transfer the assets out. But what we do need is to attract private sector capital and move this project, which Amtrak now has projected would take 30 years, cost $117 billion. Now, Congress cut off funds to high-speed rail in the coming fiscal year, and Congress certainly is not going to give Amtrak $117 billion based on its current record, lack of plan or progress in the Northeast Corridor. So we've got to work together, and we've got to find a solution to have a success, put high-speed rail and transportation projects where they make sense in place, and move forward on these important projects. So willing to work with the administration, with other members of Congress, and in an effort to, again, end the failure that we've seen and hopefully have a pattern for success for high-speed rail in the future. So that's my opening, rather lengthy comment. I defer to Mr. Sears.